Hello and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. Today's podcast is number 1409. The topic is training and the title is Basic Workout Structure Example. So I was talking with one of my clients who's a personal trainer, and we were talking about their clients, and they were just saying they were feeling a little overwhelmed, kind of just balancing all the things that they've been learning through our discussions, paired with everything they see on YouTube and Instagram and whatever, like TikTok. I guess people get information from there. Just all of the things. So all of the things feel overwhelming. And they want to create the best workouts for their clients, but they also feel ridiculously overwhelmed trying to fit in everything that everyone seems to think is super important. So they're confused, overwhelmed, and we kind of got into a fun discussion from there. Essentially, they're in the middle of the learning process, which means you're gathering information, you're exposing yourself to new information, which then feels ridiculously overwhelming because we don't have order or like significance ranking to it yet. We just have all this information, but we don't know how to organize it. So I was talking to them. There's a concept called post-complexity simplicity, and it's a process of learning in which when somebody doesn't know anything, they don't know what they don't know, so they think they know everything. So we all know this is like somebody who read one article, now they think they're, they understand everything and they give advice to everyone. And it's like, dude, you have no certification on this. You might have watched a couple YouTube videos, read a few articles. You have no hands-on actual experience, and you're going to give people advice? Holy freaking crap. Definitely should not do that. But because they don't know what they don't know, they think that they know everything. They know everything that they're aware of, if that makes sense. So that's the beginning stage of learning. Then you start to think, oh, okay, like I heard this, I heard this, and now all of a sudden I'm not sure what I do know. Now I kind of feel a little uncertain. This is confusing. This is starting to be that overwhelming part. And that's where you're exposed to the more information, but you don't know how to organize it yet. The post-complexity, like you're in the complexity at that point, the post-complexity simplicity is whenever it then starts to feel like it makes more sense because you can organize, okay, I know I've heard this and this and this, but that's only important if this or this. I heard this and this and this, but I know that I'm not at that stage yet. So you start to have more kind of organization to it. So what they're struggling with right now is they're just in the complexity issue. They're in the mix of it all. And you might find yourself there as well, is, maybe listen to our podcast. I come up with a new one every day. That's a lot of information to process. And you might be like, holy freaking crap, this is all overwhelming. So what I wanted to do, what we did for them in our discussion, and what I want to do for you today is share what we talked about, was just to kind of bring some simplicity to creating workouts. The basic format for a workout that we discussed was like 3 parts. So you're going to do this in a workout, and I'll explain it in more detail, but just to give you the base of it is you want to start the workout with what they need the most, the client. And then if you're making this for yourself, this is your workout. So start what you need the most. Then the second part is cover the basics. And the third part is add what they want or add what you want. And for an example, they had one client is an older client with lower back issues. So what does the client need? Well, they need to address their lower back issues directly. So we start with mobility work for hip positioning and hip mobility. And then we start with glute work because that client has very weak glutes. They have absolutely no glutes, actually. And their lower back is overworked and overstressed from doing all of everything. So their lower back isn't weak. It isn't injured. It's just freaking worn out. It's tired. It's overworked. So we work on mobility and glute work. That's the first part of the workout. The second part we said was to cover the basics. Now, the basics for this client, the trainer meets with them for full body workouts. So you do something for the legs, you do something for your pushing muscles, you do something for your pulling muscles. Okay? Then the third part is what do they want? Well, this client also wants a flatter stomach. So you work on core bracing because it's actually the client has a distended stomach it's not that it's all fat, it's actually also just distended because they haven't paid attention to actually having their abs strong and pulled inward. So it's just kind of that like big round turtle shell belly. So they have to work on doing dead bugs and core bracing and vacuum work, and then work on abdominal strength. Now, as you get their glutes built up, their lower back doesn't have to do all of the work anymore. That'll reduce the external pressure on the abdominal wall, and that'll actually help them pull their abdominal wall in. Now, that might take years, because this client is, I believe they're in their 50s. So it might take them years to pull that stomach back in, but can it be done? Yes. Are they going to plan on living for more than just a few years? Yes. So might as well work to look better for the rest of it. If you're going to live for the next 25 years, even if a goal takes you 5 years, you get 20 freaking years to enjoy it. Why the hell would you not work on it? So that's how we're going to structure that client's workout. But they also have another client. It's a young mom, wants to kind of get back to herself. She loves muscle and wants to be strong and fit. So she's just kind of like reclaiming herself after having the child and kind of helping with the early stages of having a baby. So what do they need? Well, this client needs a lot of abdominal strength. So they have diastasis recti, which means the separation of the abdomen muscles. And they need to kind of rehab and build it back up, their pelvic floor muscles, kind of the nitty-gritty small muscles of the hips and the groin. So that's going to be where you'd start with. You'd start with exercises to address diastasis recti and pelvic floor muscles. Then you go into the basics. Well, this trainer meets with them for upper body and lower body workouts separated. So they meet with them once a week for upper body, once a week for lower body, and then the client does on their own an upper body and a lower body workout. So for lower body days, the basics would be, something that bends at the hips and something that bends at the knees. So it might be hinges like stiff leg deadlifts, regular deadlifts, RDLs, 40 million other variations of things. And then you want something that bends at the knees, which would be like a squat or a step up or a lunge. So you want something that's like a hip hinge and then something that's a knee bend. That's kind of the basics for lower body. The basics for upper body are push and pull. So we push things with our upper body or we pull things for upper body. And we either push or pull kind of horizontally, like chest presses and back rows, or we push and pull overhead, like overhead presses and pull-ups and pull-downs. So they're going to do, like a mixed together, or some workouts they'll do overhead work and pull-downs. Other workouts will do presses and rows, or they'll have the client flip-flop with what they were doing. You just want to make sure you get all those varieties of angles in. And then what do they want? Well, they want to feel like a badass. So maybe at the end of the workout, we'll throw in a fun kind of full body complex where they have to do, kind of dumbbell clean into like a thruster, into like a burpee. Who knows? Just some kind of crazy horribleness that allows that person to feel like they get to do something cool and badass. So at our gym, we have a lot of like strongman stuff. So we have a round-headed sledgehammer from Sorinex, which is nice because a regular sledgehammer, if you hit it slightly crooked, it bounces crazy. So we have a round head sledgehammer that we use to beat up tires. So they can do tire flips and sledgehammer hits, and that's pretty exciting. That's fun stuff. So we have a lot of just weird complexities and things that we can do to put together fun, different workouts that allows that client to feel like a badass. So that's essentially what they're going to do now, the trainer, or what you can do for yourself, is say, okay, well, what do they need the most? This often isn't what you enjoy. It's usually the stuff you put off and you don't want to do, but it's what do you need the most, then you cover the basics, and then you add what they want, like what you want. So, maybe I have to work on, let's say, balance stuff. I don't really like balance things. So I'll do a little bit of balance stuff. Maybe I'll do a little bit of like stretching, kind of full body mobility things. And I normally wouldn't do those, but I'll get them done first because I know I need them. Then I'll go do some basic heavy lifts. And then maybe at the end I add some biceps because I want bigger biceps. So that's the idea, is what do you need the most? Cover the basics. And then what do you want? So that is a good, just basic format. Very easy to understand. A little bit harder to put into practice. You might have to practice with it. But it's kind of a good basic approach. Now, the next question is, well, what do we do about sets and reps? There are 4 podcasts that I want you to listen to. Yeah, I know I'm being demanding. But the information I'm about to run through for sets and reps, it's going to be very general. And for you to get better results, you have to personalize it. How you can personalize what I'm about to say would be from listening to these 4 podcasts, and then you'll know exactly how to personalize the rest of the information. So you can listen to the rest of the information, write it down, get an idea of it, start working through it, and then over the next, week or so, just listen to these 4 podcasts. I'll name them what they are in a second. Listen to these 4 podcasts and then start to refine your effort. Okay? So, podcast number 1 would be podcast number 214. It's a training podcast titled Understanding Rep Ranges and Expected Results. That way you'll know when I'm talking about time under tension, you're like, what the hell is that? This will give that answer. The next one is podcast 383. It's a training podcast titled How Your Strength Affects How You Should Train. So what you'll notice here is I'm going to give time ranges that you should feel challenged. So for example, if I want to build strength in a certain exercise or the muscles related to that exercise, I want challenges of 20 seconds or less. Well, do I do it for 5 seconds? Do I do it for 10 seconds, 15 seconds, or 20 seconds? Podcast 383 will explain, depending on your current strength levels, should you be at the bottom of ranges or top of ranges. Okay. Podcast number 220 is a training podcast titled Muscle Intention versus Movement Intention. Fan-freaking-tastic podcast if you've never listened to that. But it kind of talks about, should you move focusing on the muscles you want to work, or should you move just trying to be very efficient in the movement itself? So I might squat to try to be very efficient and blend all the use of all my muscles. I'm not necessarily trying to squat to focus on my quads, whereas a bodybuilder might do that. A bodybuilder might squat with kind of like what looks like a narrowed stance and a shortened range of motion, but they're trying to maintain constant tension on their quadriceps, and they're going to feel an intense quadricep burn. But if you're a powerlifter and you can feel a big burn in your quadriceps, you probably tore them. So that's not good. So it's very important to understand, for the outcome I want from this exercise, should I train with a muscle intention or movement intention? So very helpful there. Last one is podcast number 175. It's a trainer education podcast. I think we have like over 150 of those. I used to do them, and then I got feedback that people thought if it was trainer education and they weren't a trainer, they wouldn't listen to it. And it's like, oh gosh, that's not what I wanted. So now we just don't do that. Hopefully trainers are educated by every podcast now. But it's a trainer education podcast titled The Importance of Strength. And what that refers to, and why I think that's worth you listening to, is everyone should work to be strong. Strength is never a weakness is a phrase by Mark Bell, who is a powerlifter, and he owns a company called Slingshot. He makes like different type of equipment and stuff. He has an awesome YouTube channel. I think it's either under Super Training 06 or you can just type in Mark Bell. And they do a lot of free content out the wazoo. That is a phrase of his, strength is never a weakness, and that's 100% true. It's never bad to be strong. And what I mean by that is when you're trying to decide, if I'm doing squats today, should I just do them for muscle development, or maybe I should kind of dip in, get a set or two for strength. If I want to get, better, like glutes, I should do a little bit of strength work on my glutes as well. One of the main reasons why is the stronger you get, the more you protect your joints. The stronger you get, the more volume you can perform in your training to get bigger and faster results. So strength is very important. It's very helpful. Now, if you listen to those 4 podcasts, the rest of this will help make sense. But what do you do about sets and reps in our basic workout format? Is the reps really, they're arbitrary. What you're really measuring by is time under tension. So if I do an exercise for 10 reps, well, did the 10 reps take 10 seconds? Or did the 10 reps take a minute and a half? Big difference, right? 10 seconds is like a strength building stimulus. A minute and a half is freaking cardiovascular endurance because you can't breathe. So 10 reps is not just a singular outcome. It depends on how long the repetitions take. The time under which your body feels stressed is what dictates the way in which your body responds, not the number of repetitions that you perform. Now, it's hard for us when we're performing a movement to just count the seconds in which we're doing the movement. So we do typically count reps because that's just easier for us to track while we're also under the stress of doing the movement. But one of the things you can do is time yourself in like a couple warm-up sets and say, okay, if I want the outcome to be 15 seconds, how many reps can I perform in 15 seconds with proper speed and control? Okay, well, if it turns out to be 7, then I'm going to do sets of 7. That's my goal. Okay? So when we think about repetitions, we're actually looking at time under tension. If we place the muscles under stress and they're challenged, maximally challenged for 20 seconds or less, the body tends to respond with increase in strength. If you maximally challenge the muscles with stress of 20 to 60 seconds, and this doesn't mean like you just stop then, it's maximal stress challenge of 20 to 60 seconds, you're going to get more so muscle change. You're going to get muscle shape change if you're not eating a lot of excess calories, or you're going to get muscle growth if you are eating excess calories and protein to contribute towards growth. Then, muscle cardio and endurance is more so 60 seconds or above. So if I'm working with, I've worked with like a collegiate level swimmer before, and we had to work on strength and endurance. So we would do circuits, and maybe we do a couple like technique kind of preparatory sets, and then we do 2 maximal effort sets of 20 seconds or less to work on strength, and then we did 2 to 3 maximal effort sets of 60 seconds or more, and that helped her work on her endurance. She ended up crushing things, did very well, but that's how we kind of did it. Now that means we just set up a circuit, and the exact same exercises we used for strength and endurance. So you don't have to change exercises just because you want to change the focus. Just change the time under tension of the exercise you're already doing. That'll save you a lot of time from having to set up and change exercises all the time. But that's going to be what you want, is when you're performing an exercise, say, what do I want from this exercise? Do I want to get stronger? Then it should be stress challenges of 20 seconds or less. Do I want to get a better shape to my muscle, or I want my muscle to grow? Then it has to be challenges of 20 to 60 seconds. If I want better muscular and cardiovascular endurance related to this movement, I want challenges of 60 seconds or more. Okay? Now, how many sets? That really depends on a lot of things. So 2 options that I use very often. One option is called a peak set, and I'm just kind of making up names. There isn't any technical names here, but it's a peak set. And what this is we do a lot of warm-up efforts with increasing weights, but they're always 1, 2, maybe even 3 reps short of good form failure. So we might do a set of 10 at a weight that's 50% what they could do. We then talk about the technique. What did it look like? How did it feel? We go to 60%. Talk about the technique. What did it look like? How did it feel? Then 70%. Same thing, little break. Then 80%. Same thing, little break. Then all of a sudden we're up to around 90 to 100%, and we do 1 top effort set where they just try to crush stuff. That is fun for a lot of things. One of the things is it lets you have a lot of technique practice and a lot of teaching. So as a trainer, I love teaching. That's why I do this. So I want them to learn how the movement should feel, what they should do, how to position themselves. And it's all individual based because everybody has their own kind of ways of compensating for movements. So it's great to have teaching. So all those sets leading up to the peak set gives a lot of technique practice, a lot of teaching. But by having that peak set, it still feels like a super productive workout because they got to have a maximal challenge. It's also good for kind of performance and progression testing. So if you want to see if they've gotten stronger, over the last month or 2 months, that's a good way to set it up. You work on technique refinement, and then boom, you blast out a top effort set. Another option we'll do is multiple working sets. So this would be like they do 3, 4, even 5 working sets. They're all pretty much to good form failure, maybe about 1 rep short, but it's all pretty maximal effort, like for 3, 4, even 5 rounds. This allows for more maximal effort volume, which allows for a greater change response. So this is really good for intermediate and advanced lifters, where 1 peak set really isn't enough volume to force their body to change. You have to have multiple sets. So that's better for people who are already conditioned or already used to lifting. So that is kind of like the way to break it all down. How many sets should you do? The general recommendation would be 10 to 20 sets a week for the body parts. and this is at near maximal or maximal efforts. So if I'm doing leg muscles, I should do 10 to 20 working sets of leg muscles. Now, this is ridiculously wide. Some people might do 5 a week and feel great. Some people might get up to 24, even 30 a week and feel great. It just depends on how narrow scoped their training is. If somebody's purely explosive and strength based, they're not going to have a lot of working sets at all. If somebody is more so endurance and muscle damage, but they do high volume training, not heavy training, they're going to be up around 24, even 30 sets. It's just really whatever produces progressive results. So if you're not getting results and you're only doing 5 to 8 working sets a week, try doing more. If you're not getting results and you're doing like 30 working sets a week, try doing less. So do less working sets and try to be more intensity per working set that you actually do. So it's really hard to answer that, which is why I encourage you to listen to those 4 podcasts that I mentioned. So a basic workout structure that we can all use is, as we said, the number 1 in the workout is cover what they need most. Number 2, cover the basics. And number 3, cover what they want. So it's what do you need? Get everything in. And then what do you want? That's kind of a good general approach to structuring a workout. That will simplify it a lot, and then you can be more complex within that, but at least it gives you a framework to work within. It actually improves creativity, and it improves confidence to have some kind of framework. So that's the idea of what this is supposed to provide for you, is to know, okay, if I'm doing this, I'm doing it right. And then how creative and fun can I be within this structure? So it gives us parameters and guidelines, and then we can have a lot of fun inside of that. Okay? So again, basic format is what do they need the most? Cover the basics, add what they want. There you go. Okay, well, hopefully that was helpful. Hopefully it helped kind of narrow down at least, some idea of what should be doing in workouts. If you have any follow-up questions, just shoot me an email at brutalirongym@gmail.com. I appreciate you listening to the podcast. I want to make sure I always get what you need from it. So I'm always here to help answer questions, make this every single day. So I would welcome the emails. I appreciate everybody that does send an email. It's fun just hearing from everybody. It's really cool in the sense that the podcast has continued to grow over all the years and stuff, which is great. So thank you very much. And we've actually gotten now into, the podcast has reached over 100 countries, which is pretty neat. And for example, on Podbean is the platform that I use for the hosting thing. And it's neat that they give me a map so you can kind of see where in the world, people are listening from. And then we also have individual maps of the United States, Canada, Australia, Sweden, and Germany. It'd be nice if they gave you more options, but it's kind of cool. Like for Canada, we have listeners in Ontario and Alberta. In Australia, we have listeners in Victoria, Queensland, New South Wales. I didn't think through the fact that I'd have to learn how to pronounce these before I started this. But in Sweden, we have Stockholm, Västmanland. This is going to be horrible. But yes, so I can't pronounce any of this. This is typical American. But it looks like mainland. Then Uppsala, Uppsala. And then Kronberg, which is neat. We have multiple listeners in Germany. So in Hessen, Baden-Württemberg, and then Nordrhein-Westfalen. So good Lord, do I apologize for everyone who just had to listen to me butcher their country's names. So their subsections. But anyhow, way off track here. But thank you for everybody who's listening. We have a lot of listeners from everywhere, which is super exciting and super fun. I'm saying this, hopefully, to get past the point of embarrassing myself, but is to say that with people listening from literally everywhere now, let me know if there's specific content to your region or your needs that the podcast doesn't touch on. So I really appreciate that everybody's listening, and I love the fact that you are finding something of value in this podcast that you continue to come back to it. Now, if there's something that I could do to improve the value, that's what I would love to know. So just reach out. Our email is brutalirongym@gmail.com. I appreciate you, and I want you to get what you need from the podcast. Cool. Well, if you like today's podcast or the podcast in general, please consider sharing the podcast. The more people we share the podcast with, the more people can help, and that's the whole goal. Thank you to those who support the podcast financially. The podcast is well over $1,000 a year for hosting costs. I give an hour to it every single day. We want to keep it for free. I'd like to keep it without a bunch of commercials. So the financial support really does make a difference. It really does help. Thank you to those who do give donations. If you want to give a donation, you can go to our website, www.brutalirongym.com, and there's options there for one-time or monthly or yearly donations. So thank you. If you like the information we share in our podcast, you can find more from us on our social media channels on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and also YouTube under the name Brutal Iron Gym. If you have any questions, feedback, suggestions, anything you want to know, let us know at our email, brutalirongym@gmail.com. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening.